Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I do hope that all of you are safe and at home. I'm sure we're all hoping and praying that things get back to normal soon. In fact, we're about to discuss a byproduct of the pandemic today. As you're aware, myself and my colleagues will be discussing how COVID-19 has affected cybersecurity. We'll get to the discussion in a minute. So people are still trickling in. So in the meantime, I'm going to explain how this session is going to go and introduce our panelists while we're at it. So some basic instructions. We want this discussion to be as interactive as possible, but for obvious reasons, we can't, have everyone on the mic. So during the course of the discussion, if you have any observations or questions, please type them into the question panel. You'll see them at the bottom of your screen, and our panelists will take them up either right then or during the Q&A at the end of the session. We have 10 minutes for questions and answers. Also, the slides used in the session are simply to provide context on what's being spoken about. So make sure you're focusing on what the panelists are saying and not what's on the slides. Right. So here's a little introduction to our speakers. First is Murli. He's the Chief Solutions Officer here at AppViewX, and he's the brains behind all the great things our customers experience. So hi Murli, thank you for joining us. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Alan. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on which part of the world you are in. Irrespective of where you are, I'm sure you're at home, so it doesn't matter. That said, a little bit about my background. I started my career with primarily financial services, primarily the banks, Citibank, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, and all that. So as part of my roles there, I was part of architecture engineering, looking at business problems, identifying vendor solutions, and then architecting it and giving it to internal teams to deploy, right? I sort of do the same thing now. The only difference is now I talk to multiple customers, identify their pain points, and then talk to my dev team and building solutions for those so that we can take it to our customers. That's a high-level snippet of what I do. So primarily product management and then product strategy and whatnot.
Thank you, Murli. I'm sure you'll have a lot of great insights to bring to this discussion. Next up is Alon. He's a customer success leader here. We are glad to have you with us today for the first time, Alon. Hi. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Alan, and hi, everybody. My name is Alon Nachmani. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at AppViewX. Been here almost 4 months now. Previously, I was the CISO for National Holdings, which is a financial services firm, federally and locally regulated across the US and publicly traded. Been in this field for almost 20 years. Earlier this year, I spoke at Secure CISO Miami, specifically about COVID-19 and how it's affecting our industry. I've also spoken at the Department of Energy's annual cyber conference and at DevCon.
Thanks, Alon. That was great. We look forward to hearing from you. And the guy on the right, that's me. I'm the moderator. I'm only here to ask questions today and make sure you guys, the audience, get your questions answered. Right, so let's jump into what we're going to be covering today. We're going to start off with COVID-19 and how it's affecting businesses in general. And after that, we're going to talk about how those impacts tie into the cybersecurity of your organization or organizations across the world. And then we're going to take a deeper look at the role of PKI and automation in particular in cybersecurity and how certificate lifecycle management is a part of that. We're also going to be talking about, as promised, what firms should do to adapt to the new normal, which is remote working and the other side effects that we're going to be discussing today. And after that, of course, we have a Q&A session, so make sure you have your answers prepared. Let's jump right in. So, Alon, if we were to talk about the business impacts of how businesses are getting affected by what's happening right now, could you comment on that?
Sure, Alan, and I think that's a great way to kind of kick this off, so thank you. I think the work environment as we remember it is kind of gone, at least for the short term. Most companies are looking at working remotely or from home, kind of in the long term. Some are even talking about indefinitely. I have heard that thrown out there. the landscape is really changing, not just for the working environment, but really for everything. And for those of us who need to protect the organization, we can no longer monitor what our employees are exposed to. Everyone is using their own Wi-Fi connection with security strength that you can't control, with other devices that are on the network that we don't even know of or know how secure they are. Those who know me and those who have worked with me know that I have a few pet peeves. I can't stand using IP addresses to reach anything. And I've actually taken apart networks and dynamically assigned almost everything on it just to force people to use DNS. I also can't stand self-signed certificates. I think in a world where we can't control what people are reaching and where they're going, I don't think we can accept the risk that comes with a self-signed certificate. Add to all of this the unstable economy, downsizing, budget cuts, and there's so much more now that we need to do with so much less. I really think that the only way to do that is through automation. Morley, you work extensively with our customer security and network teams. You comment on how some of them are handling this?
Yeah. So this is an interesting shift, right? We've been talking about there's no perimeter anymore, right? But the whole behavior or the whole model is shifting, right? And it's interesting to see, right? And that is different for different countries, different economies as a whole, right? I was talking to my sister earlier today. She lives in Sacramento, California, and we were talking about her houses there and all that. And there is an interesting dynamic. People in Bay Area are moving away to outer areas like away from the Silicon Valley, because now that there is work from home, and then they are moving into Sacramento and all that, which was not possible before due to the commute and all that. So this also is changing the behavior, which means that we are in this for a longer haul. And some of the companies like Google has announced that until 2021 summer, they're not going to bring people into the offices, which is interesting, right? Now this brings an interesting point where there is no perimeter, right? Now the perimeter is all over it is spread across different locations, different regions, different physical geographies. And if you look at other parts of the world, right, where the internet or broadband connectivity or the wired connectivity or fiber connectivity is not there, they move to a more a 4G type of an LTE or a remote connectivity mode. So all of these, right, brings a completely different shift in the way we do things, and also requires a different way of looking at aspects as well. Now, when we look at those trends, right? Now, if I were to look, 10,000-foot level, I need to guard the data at rest. I need to guard the data in transit. These are the two main areas, two main encryption, and that happens everywhere, right? When data at rest, all the laptops, all the data that is there in the cloud and whatnot, and then the data in transit, right? If you look at both of those, let's look at data in transit, right? You either use a TLS, which is maybe 90% for all the web communication or data in transit communications, or you use IPsec and other capabilities and all that, right? More of a tunnel VPN. Now, for both of those, right, PKI becomes a foundation. So that perspective, that shift is happening, right? And there is a clear trend emerging, right? And now that we have to sort of secure every endpoint, not only the device endpoint, but also the web endpoints that you expose to the internet as well. So there is a lot of dynamic shift happening there. Is what I see.
Thank you for that, Murli. Next slide, please. Right. So you've told us a lot about PKI and security in general. Well, why don't we dive a little deeper this time and talk about how teams, cybersecurity teams in organizations, are dealing with this paradigm shifting change. Alone, I want to hear from you first. Could you give us some perspective on this?
Sure. If we look back at February, March this year, when IT departments were rushed to get people the ability to work, remotely, it's done very haphazardly. And actually, I spoke about this at Secure CISO Miami in early March, and actually said that my opinion was that the greatest breach in 2020 is going to come as a result of this. I've heard of entire IT budget being spent, for the year of 2020 on laptops in that 1 week. I've even heard of equipment manufacturers running out of entire stocks, people no longer sticking to what their build requirements are, what their image is, and everything was kind of deployed, often without even any security software. So, all we needed to make sure was that our users were able to connect and then be able to connect remotely. So then a VPN gateway also had to be deployed and often slapped together with a self-signed certificate, not secure, sometimes not even encrypted, just to give the users the ability to connect and be able to continue to work. Because let's be honest, at the end of the day, we can secure everything, but if our users can't work and can't get to what they need to get to, we won't. There's no company, there's no job, there's no nothing to do. All of these issues were supposed to be kind of corrected later. Go back a week or 2 or 3, whenever it is, to be able to go back and fix everything, whether it was people coming back to the office or doing it again remotely. But with what's going on with budgets and things like that, often the people who deploy that are no longer there. And I think that's a great risk right there. Morley, what is your opinion there?
Yeah, I agree with you, Alan. And there's a lot more additional things that happen, right? Like the behavior is changing and the location is changing. Now, earlier, if folks are working from home, or the companies used to work from home, right? Maybe 1 or 2 days they'd be working from home. Now, because everybody is at home, now just connecting a VPN, right? Yes, it is securing the endpoint all the way to the corporate network, but then that desktop or laptop is not physically secure, right? Meaning you might be in front of the laptop all day. You might be walking out, for maybe if he's taking a break or he's going for a smoke or a restroom break. But then that also adds a level of challenge, right? Now, if they have roommates and if they're staying with roommates and all that, each one would be connected to different organizations or maybe significant others. So a lot of different challenges come in, right? So how can we bring another factor wherein even when he moves out, sort of, it gets secured? Maybe a smart card, maybe a 2-factor, maybe a Bluetooth NFC type of integration. All of that is sort of tied to some way or the other with the PKI, right? And all of those are surfacing, right? And like what Alan mentioned, right? If my organization was not fully prepared for a long-term work from home approach, meaning that most of the cases, right? Let's say VPN has certificates, and they would have assumed that at least he'll come into to an office location at least once in a while, so that it synchronizes and gets the updated certificate and all that. Now, because he's staying at home for extended period, now delivering the certificate, digital certificates over the VPN to the endpoint is something that needs to be looked at. Second one is, laptops break, and then they might have to replace the laptops, and then it gets shipped from OEM vendor. How do you onboard? How do you trust that? How do you get that initial trust? So that's another challenge as well, right? Or maybe his laptop crashed, it got recovered. Now you need to deploy a new certificate and trust that endpoint, sanitize endpoint to connect it to the VPN. So all of those new challenges are there that keep coming up.
Thanks for that, Murli. I'm glad both of you covered, even the physical security aspect of things, because people too often, we tend to focus only on installing firewalls and antiviruses and things like that. But I did notice that you mentioned PKI and trust a lot. So what I want to ask you here is, are organizations adequately equipped to handle PKI? And what do you think they would need? Something most people don't have in order to carry out the measures you just discussed. Alon, want to take a crack at that?
Sure. One of my favorite sayings is, if you have to do something twice, you might as well automate it. And I really think what we used to do with DevOps, we're now doing with SecOps, and being able to secure our organization, having a template or having a kind of plan, a schematic of how we're going to secure our organization, being able to do that with automation, given the fact that we don't have the luxury of the staff that we used to have, budget cuts and all that stuff, again, with everything that's going on in the economy, I really think that being able to automate almost everything in the security aspect, to be able to have that, the meet yourself back on that blueprint and know what's going on and be able to understand, I really think that that's what we need right now.
All right, thank you, Alon. Murli, do you want to add anything to that? Something what people lack on the PKI front or the cybersecurity front in general? What they need to be successful in bolstering their securities?
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned, right, PKI is becoming the cornerstone for data in transit, which means that now there is going to be a lot more data in transit, which means any externally exposed endpoint. See, there are customers whom we talk to wants to secure any external sites which is not used by the public with a mutual certificate, so that only their employees would access, even though it is a public site or whether exposed without VPN connectivity and whatnot, right? In all of those, there is a client certificate is issued with which he can connect for a mutual authentication onto the endpoint. Gives a high level of assurance, validity, and transport level security and all that. In all of those, there are multiple certificates deployed, multiple certificates issued. So, like Ella mentioned, automation is the way to go, right? And having a central management, right, or having a way of centrally managing it, a central lifecycle management of it, is definitely needed, and that would actually simplify the whole process, because you don't know where things can go wrong, and unless you have a tab at it, and it's not humanly possible to manually do that, especially with all these distributed deployments and distributed users across the globe, distributed time zones as well, right? And with the limited resource that you can get, especially during this pandemic. So automation, central inventory, and then integrating the whole piece is the key.
That was great. Thanks a lot, Murli. Can we move to the next slide? Thank you. So Murli, I want to extend on what we spoke about just a few seconds earlier. I'm sure most of our listeners want to know, is there anyone who has come up to you and said, hey, I'm switching to remote work. I need to implement a good form of PKI and certificate lifecycle automation to ensure my remote workforce remains secure. So without taking names or getting too particular, can you give us an example of someone who came up to you and said this and the solution we offered them?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the organization that I'm going to talk about is a heavily distributed healthcare organization. So it's during the pandemic, that's when they wanted all of them to be connected and be available and working as well, right? But unfortunately, for them to enable the remote working, right, to connect to the VPN, they need to provision client certificates, right, to connect to the VPN. So it was a chicken or egg problem that they had, where they have to come in to their office to receive the client certificate to connect to the VPN. So to basically work remotely, they need to connect to VPN, and to connect to VPN, they need a certificate, and to get the certificate, they have to come into the office. So it was an interesting challenge that they had, and what we did is we enabled them a remote way of automatically validating their trust and provisioning an enrollment over secure transport, right? Which is a secure way of enrolling the customers, or rather those employees, with all their different types of their client machine, which is Windows, Mac, and they had few Linux as well, right? So we had they had a variety of deployments, or rather endpoints. They also had some type of bring your own device, because there are a lot of contractors, again in healthcare, I guess, the folks, rather the healthcare folks or doctors would like to be contractors than direct employees. So they had their own BYOD type of scenario. So we had to cater to a wide variety of use cases that they had. And the way we enable that is basically they will prove, or they will have a way of validating their identity, right? Multi-factor validation of their identity, prove that they are who they are claiming to be, right? And they basically authorize their device. So it's a relative trust. It's that gets translated to the device. And once the device gets the certificate, then due to inherited trust, right? Basically, once they prove that they have ownership of the private key through inherited trust, we issue a certificate and renew certificate and all that. So all this we did in the middle, right in the middle of pandemic, I think early April, and we enrolled close to 50,000 plus of their distributed workloads all over. These are folks who don't have connectivity. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands who are already connected and all that. These are new folks who didn't have connectivity. So we enabled them to connect, and this was done in a matter of a few days after we rolled out the enrollment capability. And what this enabled them is they were able to get easily see value, or rather quickly provide value to the customers, to their employees, and more importantly, they were able to work during the pandemic seamlessly, right? That reduced the load on their IT teams, which was flooded with the manual process because of, you know, this whole thing hit like a tsunami, right? In the middle of nowhere, suddenly it hit them, and then this automation helped them enable that, and that solved a huge problem that they had, and also secured it end to end. Right now, we have a secure way of deploying, automating, and rolling their client certificates, with which, see, a lot of those contractors might not use their VPN even, right? But then they can use the client certificate to connect to any of those partner messaging applications which they expose and enforce client certificate. So this, because this client certificate is issued by a high assurance PKI that they have, so now it makes it a lot more secure for them to connect. They don't have to have a full VPN connectivity coming all the way into their corporate network and whatnot.
Thank you, Murli. That was really interesting. I'm pretty sure most of our audience, or some of them at least, will want to replicate this, or try at least know how it's done. You guys had better be ready to ask some questions when the Q&A bar comes up. Right. Moving on. how let's talk about the future, right? If this is going to be the new normal, um, and companies are not, let's assume that companies are not adequately equipped to deal with remote working and the remote workforce and the security challenges that come with it, and if they wanted to get on that path, how would they start, how would they sustain it, and what would they have to do to scale up their programs? Alone, can you take that?
Sure. I think obviously reaching out to us and we'll all be more than happy to help them. But at the same time, I think understanding what you're doing now and where can automation help you is probably where I would start. Looking at, again, almost everybody I've spoken to in the industry has been talking about cost savings and where can they quote unquote have cuts. I think that looking at the tasks that are being done again and again and again, or even I've seen organizations that are very large organizations, without mentioning names, some pretty big banks, where they'll automate, for example, certificates that expire need to be renewed will be all in a calendar invite, and if somebody misses that reminder, the certificate expires. So it's not just a matter of cost savings; it's also a matter of ensuring the experience. I think that's a great place to start, in my opinion, and understanding how can a solution like ours help you in this environment. Morley, is there anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I think the longer this stays, right, which as of now looks definitely it's going to go past the winter. So the longer it stays, we are going to rethink a lot of things, right? I think the company is going to look at the cost. The company is going to look at how people work, and the most important thing is the perimeter is going to disappear completely, right? And as the perimeter is going to expand into a different angle, I think one of the key aspects that we have to, or other companies have to look at is what endpoints are we exposing outside, right? Because as more people start connecting to the VPN, unless you don't want them to connect to VPN unless you really want them to have access, right? If there are contractors, or there are individuals who access only a certain portion of it, right? Then basically you can enable them to directly connect with it with a multi-factor authentication, or even better, a client-side certificate. And that certificate can be issued with a smart card, which has to be connected to gain access, right? So those type of deployments are going to increase, and I feel PK is going to become more at the center because of its what do you call it? Its relevance in the data and transit security, right? The transport layer security. So that's what I think is going to happen, and we have to be aware of as well.
So, Murli, one thing our audience might like to hear is, if we are going to adopt this, if we are going to adopt a strong PKI, a strong cybersecurity strategy, what are the things that I have to look out for? Is there something that might be daunting to me, something I have to take a lot of care of before I look into?
Yeah. So see, traditionally PKI, right, deployments, customers would a majority of them have deployed Microsoft PKI, which is free. It comes out of the box, so it makes it easy for them to deploy. But what I feel is with the increase in the workloads due to containerization, DevOps, and IoT, and also these distributed workforce with multiple devices connecting, bring your own device, all those things, right? So there is going to be a huge number of certificates issued. or digital identity, digital IDs issued to everything, right? Now, gone are days where you used to have like 5-year certificates, 2-year certificates, and all that, right? Safari said no more 2-year, right? So it's going to be 1 year, and it's soon going to be shorter than that, right? I've had customers talking about short-lived certificates deployment, right? 1 month to 3 months for all their applications and users and whatnot. So as you move towards a more short-lived certificate and increased number of certificates, right? The approach or the scale changes and the deployment changes. Now you cannot just have one issuing CA, right? You obviously everybody would have an offline route. You cannot just have one issuing CA and issue certificate for everything in the world, right? Now then you basically look at when ideally would be maybe one issuing CA for user identity, one for machine identity, and one for maybe DevOps, which requires a very short-lived certificates, and things like that, right? Maybe cloud and basically you would bring your own for in the client to the cloud. Now, doing that with Microsoft sort of adds additional complexity, additional scale, and all that. So that's where customers are looking at alternatives for a high scale on-prem solution, or even a cloud solution, or a software as a service solutions to scale, with the cloud providers and all that. So there is a huge transformation happening there. And also, while they are looking at doing that, right, they're also looking at securing the PKI as well, right? It's an opportunity for them to rebuild with a stronger foundation, and that is where they look at having a HSM to back the keys, and basically automation to fully automate and secure the key so that the human factor is removed, right? Especially when folks are distributed, right? Nobody can see anything, right? It's all somewhere, right? There's no difference between cloud and the data center anymore, because you're not, even data center is now completely remote. Nobody's going to data center. Nobody's traveling even, right? So in that case, security becomes more focused and more prominent. So automation enables secure deployment of certain keys across all the devices, right? That is where the certificate lifecycle management really helps in removing that human component from accessing keys or managing and or handling keys, right? It sort of enables that. So those are some of the things that are changing and that folks are also looking at as well.
Thanks, Murli. That answered a lot of questions, some of my own as well. So, right, I think we're done with the discussion for now. Let's move on to the questions. So, guys, if you have questions, please type them into the question answer box. We're going to take them up as and when they're entered. Meanwhile, let's take a look at some of the questions that have been asked already. There's one I see that says, what are the resources needed to build and operate certificate lifecycle management? Alon, you want to take that?
I think that really depends on the size of the organization and kind of the footprint and what you're trying to accomplish. I don't think that's something that's kind of easy to answer. It really depends on your footprint, that's like everything. Murli, I mean, is there anything you would give it that's kind of like a catch-all there?
Yeah, so yeah, it does depend on your organization and deployment and internal process. Whole bunch of things are involved, right? But that said, a certificate lifecycle management deployment should not be like a 10-person heavy lifting effort, or even like 1-person heavy lifting effort, right? Ideally, if you see people who have job profile saying I have experience in managing this certificate lifecycle management product, that means it is heavy lifting, right? That's that's in my opinion a negative, right? Because it means that you need professional services. You need it means that you need heavy lifting. So the whole idea is to basically deploy and automate, right? And you don't want to end up deploying a complicated system where you need a dedicated resource or multiple dedicated resources to manage that. So my take is, yes, if the organization is so huge and it is critical, then yes, you could have maybe 1 or 2 resources for the initial onboarding, more as a professional services to educate your existing teams, internal teams, right? Not to look for a completely new talent, right? Then that defeats the purpose. You basically, it's almost like a whack-a-mole. You move the problem from one place to another place, right? That's how I look at it.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. Right, this is a bit that relates to us. How has your company adapted to remote working, and what are the challenges you faced? You want to take that, Murli?
Yes. In fact, interestingly, in early March, this was right after RSA, when we were at RSA, I think when we saw in RSA quite a few companies have canceled. I mean, mostly companies from China, right? It's mostly Chinese companies have canceled. But then the larger player was IBM, who canceled their participation in RSA. I think when we saw that, the first thing that we did is we enabled a BCP process, right? Business continuity process, where we ran a firm-wide check on remote connectivity, made sure everybody is able to connect, and we asked folks to dial in on a Saturday to make sure everything works when everybody is at home. So we were in fact very well prepared for that, thankfully, knock on wood. And I guess I think looking at RSA, some of the empty stands. In fact, just right behind our booth at RSA, there was a huge empty space, right? And if you have attended RSA, that's a rare occurrence, right? I mean, mostly booths are crowded one next to each other. So in fact, we are taking like really good pictures in that open space, and they put tables and chairs, so pretty much you could go sit there. What that translated is, it basically enabled us to think in advance and then plan in advance to initiate our BCP process, so that we were all ready for this pandemic. And luckily, because we were ready, we didn't miss a beat. So once the things kicked in, and everybody continued to work.
That was great. Let's move on to the next question. This is an interesting one. What are the other technologies needed in case permanent work from home is the new normal? Alone, I think you can answer that pretty well.
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. I think that also, going back to what we said before, I think that matters on the type of organization and more the security stance in that organization. If it's an organization that has the ability to enforce security, then I would say, always on VPN and monitoring what your employees are doing, and basically turning their home desk or their home office or their remote office into their work desk. Soft phones was a big one. I remember soft phones after Sandy was a huge one for us, and getting everybody after Sandy up and running for those few months. And I do think that Sandy, for those of us who were in the field, was a great kind of exercise for what we're going through now. Other than that, making sure that your environments are exposed to only the right people. Adding up, obviously, I'm a big proponent of two-factor authentication and making sure everything has that extra layer of security. And then obviously, based on the industry and then what you're trying to accomplish, and obviously the compliances and the regulations, what you would need to meet those as well.
Thanks, Alon. We have two more questions. Let's take the first. The customer that was mentioned. Can the same be replicated for orgs of any size? Murli, this seems perfectly suited to you. Why don't you take it?
Yes, absolutely. So yes, definitely. I mean, we have been working with a couple of other customers also in that area, and we have with this success story, we have been talking to them to roll that out for other customers. That said, yes, it can absolutely be replicated. Even hundreds of millions of employees distributed, we can do that, not an issue. And the scale is possible. And also, even if this particular customer that I spoke of, they have multiple companies that they're acquired and they haven't fully integrated to them, right? It is a segregated environment. So similar type of deployments is possible, and especially when there is a different levels of access for contractor and employee or even external consultant and whatnot, right? All those capabilities are there. All that can be enabled. So there's, yeah, it is possible.
Okay, we have another question. Is the product cloud-based? A very simple question. Anyone can take it?
Yeah. So yeah, I'll answer that, right? See, when you look at, I mean, you can look at any of the CLM products, right? Ours is the only product, and I can proudly say this. Ours is the only product which is a next generation, containerized, perfectly suited for cloud. Now, because of that, right? It can integrate, and in fact, the use case that I was talking about, they were running in AWS, right? So we just had a cloud formation template, and then we spun up the whole thing. You know, in fact, just before the COVID hit, we were in their dev environment, just sitting up there and whatnot, right? During this pandemic, or rather, at least when things were heating up, that is when we deployed in prod and rolled this out in this whole process. And we did that with a cloud formation template, with multi-node deployment, with their different security needs and a whole bunch of stuff and all that. So yes, it can be cloud hosted. It can be consumed as a service. It can be on-prem, right? And it basically, it's Kubernetes, autoscale, next generation, NoSQL, horizontally scalable. That is a major differentiating factor for our product compared to other competition that we have.
Thanks, Murli. Let me see. I think that's about it. We're done with our questions. So by extension, we're done with this session. Murli, Alon, thank you so much for expressing your views here. They were, even I found them very valuable. I'm sure our audience found them that way as well. And those of you who joined, thank you for joining us. We really hope you join us for the rest of our sessions. You should be, I mean, watch the space. We'll let you know. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. Thank you.